Welcome to the Morning DNA for August 31st, 2020. I am the man of a single black shirt, Aaron Dicer. She is Danae Hughes, the woman of a million distractions, and apparently a black shirt as well today. It happens every once in a while. We can't hear Danae. Why can't we hear Danae? There you are. You're good. You're good. It was me.
Did you mute me?
Listen, I am telling you, hold on. We said from the beginning this was an experiment, right? So many things, we're just experimenting.
You
right?
muted me.
So what happened? What happened?
Oh, what happened was
I was in the midst of the countdown and realized your muke was unmuted. Your mic was unmuted, and so
is it because I clapped the music?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make sure that you knew, that it wasn't. I didn't have any way to tell you, so I just muted your mic. But yes, it is now unmuted, and you are with us. And thank you for being patient through technical difficulties this morning. We have kind of a special episode that we're doing, and so we've kind of been working through how to do that. All that kind of stuff. Plus, for whatever reason, on this one morning, I decided to schedule the event rather than just go live when we were ready. And so people have known for half an hour that we are going live this morning.
Gosh.
And so there were people in the comment section being like, I thought this started at 9. So thank you.
Guys, I'm so sorry about that.
We appreciate it.
Would you call it like a comedy of errors this morning?
Yes. Welcome Handquake says, well, that was the first part of the show, a social experiment. You are absolutely correct.
Super bland.
Cyregdo says, woohoo, I'm not late today. Mostly because my CinemaSins episode hasn't popped up in my podcast apps yet. So, well, there you go. Very nice. Woo! And I think this wonderful viewer, Breezy Lady B, saying, morning. Morning
from the Twitteroos.
As well.
I've actually been reading up on Twitch to try to figure out how I'm going to Twitch because, as we get closer and closer, I'm going to have to know what to do. I mean, I understand that for what we do, it'll just be like an automatic, simple, quick, like, oh, it just goes there and it's magic. But if I wanted to do something on Twitch, like stream playing video games or something like that, I would need to know what buttons to push.
Yeah, you have to do a little bit of research.
There's so much on Twitch. It's like really intimidating.
Well, I will give you an update. Thanks to brand new member of Team DNA, Amanda. We are now 2 members away from going live to more places and being able to level up our streaming. So just 2 more members at patreon.com/studiodna.
I'm excited about it. But I'm also nervous about it because I feel like if I have a Twitch, which I do have one, like I have a profile on Twitch you can already follow. It's just there's nothing there. And even last night, I changed my name because my name on Twitch was like an old name I picked out years ago. It was Quacker Punch, which is an inside joke.
Yeah, that was an inside joke with us, right? Like it's just something you said one day and it became a thing. Yeah, no, I remember that.
And I was like, oh, that's a fun one, Quacker Punch. And so I did that. But then I realized just for continuity, it needed to be Danae Says, which is my Instagram and my Twitter. So I went and changed it last night while I was doing this Twitter research. And
yeah,
there's so much.
There is a lot. We are excited to be able to be in more places. We love being on YouTube, the
Periscope,
the Aaron Dicer Twitch, and on Periscope, the Aaron and Danae Periscope. But we would love to have an Aaron and Danae Twitch or a Danae Twitch that we could go to. We could also go live to my Periscope, your Periscope. We could.
I don't even know if I have Periscope anymore.
So much. Well, if you have Twitter, it's very easy to have Periscope. You basically just click a button and you have Periscope. So
cool.
So yeah, that's not too complicated. We may even stream to that other place eventually as well.
Hey, before we get into the show today, can you help me understand something?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So for research purposes, I'm trying to understand how weather vanes work.
Okay. Fair enough.
And so I'm reading this and I just want to make sure that I understand what it's saying. And I know that you're a safe person to talk to.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So the weather vane points.
You fool! No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Continue.
No, don't crush my soul. Okay. The weather vane points toward the source of the wind, is what this says.
Yes.
Because the balancing weight is at the point of the arrow.
Correct.
So the surface area towards the back of the arrow is lighter, and so it catches the breeze and turns the distributed air flow evenly on both sides of the arrow, therefore swiveling around.
So the rooster points at which direction the wind is coming from. Yes.
Right. So if the wind is blowing in my face, the weather vane is pointed the direction I'm looking.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the wind is blowing in the rooster's face. You got it.
I got it. Okay.
Yes.
I was really excited because I thought that I caught this like really intricate thing that was wrong with what I was watching because I'm doing it for a script. But they got it right. So
no, okay. Well, that's too bad. That's
it
unfortunate.
Is too bad.
It's always unfortunate when movies get things right for our other job. Okay, so you want to shoe a dough? Ready to shoe a dough?
I don't know.
This is one today that I have kind of pushed the way on because I re-listened to a conversation we had 4 years ago. And with some of the things that have happened in culture lately and continue to happen in culture with issues of race, police brutality, those kind of things. And also even with Chadwick Boseman passing away so unexpectedly this past weekend. And I was kind of emotional about that. And I spent some time crying about that, crying about our country, different things like that. And so I went back and listened to a conversation we did with hip hop artist Derek Minor, who, if you haven't heard much of his stuff, I would highly encourage it. 4 years ago, in the conversation as I listened to it, it was between Danae, myself, and him on the Shoe the Dough podcast, was powerful to me in a couple of ways. Number one, it is a reminder of how unfortunate it is that we continue to have these conversations. You know what I mean? That it continues to be relevant. You know, just the fact that we can play this conversation from 4 years ago and it feels like we recorded it this weekend struck me as one of those things that very deeply hurt in my soul. You know, that we continue to have to push through this and figure out what it means in our country. And then the other thing is just to hear Derek talk about his own experience. And for me, that is the only way we progress through any cultural difficulties like this. And that is quite an understatement to call racism in America a cultural difficulty. It is so much more than that. But if we're going to continue through these things, we have to listen to each other and we have to hear the hurt and we have to hear, we have to have an empathy that comes through us for people in our world. So what I thought we could do today is to replay that conversation. We will leave it live for comments. I may even put comments up that I feel are appropriate during the conversation. I think it basically is an episode of a podcast. So Danae and I start with, I did edit it a little bit to take out like the theme music and that kind of stuff, but it does start with an introduction of the interview that kind of goes over it a little bit, and then ends with kind of a podcast ending that I tweaked just a little bit as well. But I did want to kind of have that here in this environment as we try this new thing out, again, experimental, and try to figure out what we can do with this thing to see how revisiting something like that might work. And I was curious, Danae, because you haven't re-listened to it. Like,
No.
Do you remember anything about that conversation? Like,
is this the one where I cried?
Yes, you do cry.
Okay.
Yes, rightfully so.
I do remember crying.
When you say the one that you cried, I mean there have been several.
That's true.
So
yeah. So I think what's really crazy for me thinking about this, and I'm excited to listen to it again, and kind of like excited in a way where I want to know what my thoughts were 4 years ago compared to how I would talk about things now. Because I've learned a lot more even in the last 4 years that I didn't know when I was talking with Derek. But I would say that starting 4 years ago would be considered Danae's awakening. Yeah. Because of course, how could anyone raised in the Midwest like I have been really understand what it's like to live in a racist community? And yeah, there's been a lot of things that have changed in my personal life and my family life. I've got family that lives in DC and in Brooklyn, who are like my cousin Bianca and my sister-in-law Holly, both married Black men, and now they have, beautiful families. And so our conversation about race is so different now. And yeah, so I'm curious to hear it. I always get a little bit nervous because I don't I don't want to come across in a wrong way ever. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, but I'm excited about trying this conversational part of our new show with you guys, not just introducing a topic like racism and replaying an interview, but even just being able to kind of go back into our archives and sort of re-listen to things together and have a new conversation. That's really interesting. And I look forward to kind of testing this out. So thank you guys for hanging out with us and testing out this format. We will be hanging out with you. So
David says, gee, is this the Mixler upgrade? Now that's an old school DNA fan right there.
Oh my God. That
yes.
is an old school DNA fan right there.
One of the best old school DNA fans. We love David. Yes, this is a Mixler, then on to Spreaker. This is the new home of DNA and kind of how we're
technically it was like, wasn't it like Google Hangout?
Yes. Yeah.
Then it was.
So, in fact, we are progressively releasing, Danae, I don't even know if you know this, on our YouTube channel, those old tests we did back on Google Hangouts.
No.
Like in 2012. 8 years ago. You will be surprised. 8 years ago, we were doing this show like this as best we could on Google Hangouts. This has always been the vision of what we wanted this show to be, is a live video audio show with interaction. And it's taken 8 years for us to
and a pandemic
to finally land on what the current experiment is. So yes, appreciate you asking that.
So before we get started, at the end of the show, are we just going to wrap up? Are we doing Q&A at the end? Are we like, how are we going to be kind of saying goodbye to everybody at the end of this? So I kind of know.
I think there is, in the recording itself, there is a closure.
Okay.
That I like. And so what we will do is, if you have any comments or questions during, feel free to throw those up. We can comment as well. So I can post those as images, like you see the comment images throughout the show. Again, this is all fingers crossed. This is new. We're experimenting here. So the hope is that we will be able to have even a bit of interaction with you as we listen to this. We won't be on video. It will just be the playing of the interview itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Gotcha.
We should be able to do it that way.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's get into it. We appreciate you being here. Again, this is a recording from summer of 2016, just for context. The most recent events that led to this conversation involved Alton Sterling. And as one of, again, the unfortunate many names that we remember in this conversation, and many names that continue to be added to the list, unfortunately. And so we got in contact with Derek, who we knew was very passionate. He had just written a song. You will hear that song in this interview. He had just written a song as this happened that weekend, and he tells the story of that a little bit. So that should give you a little context as to what, in that moment, we were dealing with, but I wanted to kind of give you that before we go in. So here's the next part of the experiment, and we will again be live Mondays and some days. So be subscribed on YouTube. We are, by the way, 4 subscribers away from 100 subscribers on YouTube. We are 7 subscribers away from the 50 that are needed on Twitch, and 2 more members of Team DNA at Patreon away from upgrading to high definition. Today is so ready for high definition.
We don't need high definition.
Other outlets.
We don't need it. Let me not have it. Can I have the side of the screen that's just you
could absolutely
lower it down to like 720.
Yep, you can keep yours at 720
just
if you want.
Super blurry, Danae.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Thank you again, and we appreciate all of you, and let's see if we can make this work.
There's been a lot of things that have been happening in our culture over the last week, and it feels like this conversation is more relevant than ever. And if you've been listening to Shoe the Dough for a while, you know that No Label Safe is a segment that we've been doing from the beginning. It used to be called No Longer Safe. So if you go back in your podcast feed, just look for NLS. You'll see all of those there. And this is kind of where we have those deeper conversations. So first of all, this is going to be more of a serious show, and possibly not a show that you want to have playing around certain people, including little ones potentially.
If you want to have some serious conversations with them, that's
up to you.
We speak very honestly. Derek especially speaks very honestly about racial epithets and those kind of things. So you have to explain some words. You'll have to explain some attitudes, all that kind of stuff.
And strong emotion from all of us as we had this conversation. But special thanks to Derek for being willing to have this conversation with Aaron and I, because it was a really powerful one. We've been talking about it pretty opened the line of communication for us to continue to talk. So if there is anything that you hear in this podcast that you really feel is something that you want us to kind of go back into or get more clarification or dig deeper, if you have any questions or comments or feedback, please feel free to email Aaron and I at aaronanddanae@gmail.com. And hopefully this is just the beginning of more conversations to follow about how we can kind of continue to try to link arms together and work towards equality.
I'm excited to play this for you. Excited to continue to have this conversation. Danae, it just kind of goes straight into our full interview with him, and so we need like some sort of sound effect. I didn't load one up, so you need to give us like a whoosh or something before we actually get into the interview, and then you'll hear the three of us talk for about an hour or so.
Oh, I got it.
Ready?
I got it. Ready?
All right.
Ready? Hello?
What's up?
You're there. Hello.
Yeah, I was in here just pretending to be Jay-Z.
Wah, wah, wah.
Cheer, baby.
Oh my goodness.
What's happening?
Not much, man. Thanks for your time this morning. I was just thinking of the guy, I can't remember his name, on SNL that does all the amazing impersonations of the rappers.
Oh, Jay Farrow.
Yeah, Farrow. He's incredible at that stuff, man.
He kills it. Yeah, he had one with Denzel Washington. He had a YouTube video with Denzel Washington and Will Smith getting into an argument over a burger or something, and it was just it was the funniest thing ever. That's my first time ever seeing him. He killed it though.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're fired.
I was gonna pretend, but then I was like, no. You don't have to pretend to be impressive.
There you go. Be comfortable in your skin.
That's right. That is right.
That's what I'm talking about.
We heard you chatting with a couple of our friends. I heard you talk to Chris Chicago a little bit, and Mike Couchman as well is, obviously a boost and one of our close friends. And we thought, man, we'd love to talk to you just with everything that's going on. And now that we're, kind of a few days later and able to, I think, process a little more, that we're past some of the initial emotion of so many things that happened, bang, 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 right in a row, and to be able to kind of sit back together and have a conversation about our world, about race, about racism. We do this in a podcast segment we call No Label Safe.
It's about removing labels from our life, and instead of talking to an atheist or a homosexual, we're talking to Ida or Brian.
So basically what that is we kind of talk about different topics that are hard to talk about and kind of take the labels off. One
of the cool things that happened when Aaron and I connected is we're both Christians, but we came from really different backgrounds and kind of landed in a very similar place in our Christianity. And we found that we can converse about a lot of different types of topics, and it doesn't tend to get very, polarized. We're just kind of chill. We might not agree, but we're both, pretty even keeled. The people who listen to the podcast tend to really be excited about the segment because it allows them to listen to a conversation where we don't necessarily all land in popsicles, rainbows, and happiness, but we're having a dialogue.
And the point isn't to convince each other of anything. The point is to
just
talk and listen to each other and those kind of things. So we've talked about, as mentioned, topics from atheism to homosexuality to we had a mega church pastor on and talked about what it's like to be a church pastor of a church of thousands of people. Whatever those kind of things are that people can kind of feel labeled with. One we haven't touched on yet that we are really hoping to have a great conversation with you about is the idea of race and racism, and especially in our country with everything that's happened recently.
Sure.
More and more people are having those conversations, which we think is a great thing, because until you start opening up about that stuff, you can't find that common ground and you can't find understanding.
Right. Absolutely. I totally agree.
One of the results of sort of the last week has been just so many more people in my circle, which as I'm 35 years old, white female raised in the Midwest, Springfield, Missouri. So I was raised by parents who told me and taught me and showed me all about equality and love. And so truly and honestly, until this last week, I don't think I really had a real wake up, because I haven't really been faced with the multitude of really dark opinions out there, about race. And so I'm kind of like, personally and in my circle, there's a lot more conversation than I've ever experienced in my whole life about racism in America. And I've never, even in my language, said white people, black people.
It's one of the first things I noticed about Danae when she would, want to describe some way, somebody. She would stay away from saying, a black person or a white person or an
I've
Asian,
never done that.
or it's just not something that.
It's like the guy in the green shirt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's my life. So all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's my life and I've enjoyed it, but that's not necessarily reality. And so I'm acclimating. You know what I'm saying? So I've not wanted to go talk about racism or race because I've just not been comfortable with it. But now I'm like, oh, it's not about comfort. This is about having a conversation and trying to really figure out where we can go and move forward. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared your background. I think that would be beneficial as we get into this conversation for each of us to kind of share our background with racism, how it's impacted us, Derek, why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself as a black man growing up in this country? How has the issue of race showed itself in your life and made you kind of who you are today, or informed that in your life?
Yeah, it's funny. As I hear what you're saying, I'm like, man, that is awesome. I think it's great that your parents fought for you to see people as people. Unfortunately, being black in America and being part of the minority culture, there's very few times when my race doesn't make me stick out. I mean, you gotta think, black people are 13% of the population. So my race is going to stick out when you think about intersecting with the majority culture. So, and it's not always a negative thing, but it's just a thing. So I think the first thing that has to get established is, it's really easy for a white person to say, man, I don't see color, or I don't, I've never had to think of that. That's because 9 times out of 10, you don't have to go to a black business that's owned by a black person if you don't want to. I mean, you're part of the majority culture, so everything is ran by the majority culture. I mean, it's the idea of, I heard someone say it's like this. It's like a right-handed person not understanding how much of the world is built around what they do. Like, a left-handed person is constantly have to make adjustments because everything is made for a right-handed person, And I think, as far as for me, my first intersection with race was at a very young age. I was 8, maybe. And my dad lived in these high-rise apartments, and I was just playing on the elevator, like being a goofy little 8-year-old. Playing on the elevator, running around, and I saw this lady. She was this older white lady. She had a big white afro. I'll never forget her face. She had the coolest afro ever, really. I mean, it was round, shaped up perfectly. And I remember getting, like, playing on the elevator, and I guess, I probably hit a whole bunch of buttons, and I remember her saying, "Get out of my way, you stupid nigger." I'll never forget that.
Wow.
And I go upstairs and I tell my dad what happens, and he gets mad and cusses the lady out. And that was the first time I realized I was different. Like, maybe not that I was different, but I realized that people noticed I was different.
Right.
And I was living in Michigan. So then you fast forward to my high school. I went to a school that was a K through 12 school. It's called a unit school. So the people that you're friends with from 4th grade, you're gonna be in class with them all the way up until you graduate.
Whoa.
So there's no changing of anything. And I was the only black kid in my class for the longest time. So I remember people would say just certain things. Like I remember my first day at school in that 4th grade class. I remember I was getting off of the bus, and I had a kid. I had glasses. I'll never forget this. This is burned into my brain forever. But I got off of the bus. No one talked to me the whole time. And when I got off of the bus, I had a guy spit a loogie, and I remember it running down my glasses.
Wow.
And he yells "porch monkey" out of the bus as it takes off. And they were bigger than me, and I was by myself, and I just kind of had to just deal with it. I mean, and I could take you through countless things: being called a coon, being called, having rebel flags shoved in my lockers when I open them up. And so that's why it's funny when people talk about heritage, not hate. I was like, I've never had anyone have a rebel flag and use it in a way that was uplifting for me.
Yeah.
But that's just me, though. Maybe someone else's experience is different. But so my situation with race is, if we're talking today, I have no clue how. I mean, like, most of my fans are predominantly white. I could say that easily. I do a lot of shows in white evangelical circles with in churches, and I mean, the Lord has really worked on my heart to where I don't harbor any bitterness towards a whole race. I have very little tolerance for racial injustice, and that's on any color. I have very little tolerance for a black person, calling a white person whatever, and vice versa. And it's funny because even today, I remember I did a show and I had some kids on stage while I was rapping. It got quiet and some kids was like, "I bet your middle name is Tyrone," and just really insensitive stuff. And this is me as an artist, like pouring my heart out on stage and having kids say that, and having their parents not really correct them. And it was funny because later on that day, I had a guy tell me a story. He said, this is last year. The guy tells me, he says, "Yeah, I tore my ACL, and I told my surgeon, I said, hey, can you give me a black person's cadaver ligament so I can jump higher when this is all over with?"
Wow.
And I'm like, you've brought me out to perform, and you said this to me, like, and I think he literally thought that was going to be a joke. I was going to be like, yeah, yes, that's
Right.
hilarious. I think he thought I was going to laugh, and I just kind of looked at him perplexed, like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what are you saying? Like, so it's just funny. Like, when we talk about race, I think when people think racism, they think racism in the sense of Ku Klux Klan, the most extreme version of it. But I think it's not that scares me. It's the small racial biases that everyone has. That's the most frightening thing, the more nuanced version of racism.
Yeah.
But,
as you deal with that kind of stuff, you almost start to see, because I think what you were saying was you didn't feel like his heart was in the wrong place.
Nah.
It's just his mind was in the wrong place. There's an ignorance there, and there is a slight difference between ignorance and hate, right? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And part of the battle, I think, for all of us, myself included, is figuring out where we're ignorant and being willing to educate ourselves and change, even if we don't understand it, because we know it's hurting someone else.
Talk a little bit about, Aaron, like who you are too.
Sure.
Because I feel like when you kind of come out of that, that's a really good place to talk, is that feeling of moving from a place of like, for me, I am moving out of maybe not ignorance, like on some levels. Like, I'm hearing your stories, Derek, and I'm like, oh, I'm not like that. Oh, I don't have friends like that. Oh, I'm glad I don't know that, But at the same time, I'm like, but I still have a level of ignorance because I'm inside such a bubble. You know what I'm saying? So I'm kind of curious.
I think one of the most common ones, and I think one of the ones I have been guilty of in the past, before I was made aware of it, was the idea of saying something like, "Oh, that guy's so well spoken," or something like that,
yeah.
as if
Yeah.
and it's just like, I meant that as a compliment, but would I have said it if it were a white person? Did I just say it because I'm not used to somebody who's black speaking the way that I speak, or whatever? So kind of dealing with those kind of issues. Yeah, and a lot of that ignorance comes from, and Danae, I'd be curious to hear, did you grow up with black friends? Did you have,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. I
So
grew up with black friends, dated black guys. Yeah.
I am totally different. I grew up in a community that was literally 99% Caucasian. So there, I mean, it was in Southern Ohio, and there just weren't any black people that I came into contact with. I think the first black person I knew was in college. So, I am completely separated from that culture, from that environment. I mean, obviously I knew of, American history and, and studied slavery and I knew of, all the civil rights and that kind of, like I learned that stuff. But that's different than actually having a personal friend or somebody that can help teach you, the nuances of what, how cultures are different.
Now,
Or
I do want to say though that my friends group was, large in time in school, which I didn't enjoy school, so I didn't really invest in the friends of school, and I didn't really like get into culture. I didn't have someone being like, and this is how this works, and
Right.
this is my time
Yeah.
to really learn, because that's another thing that Derek, I really love that you said, be a student. I loved that because if there's something that I am not somebody who knows a lot about this topic. I'm here to learn.
And that's what's important, is to keep listening. And so my experience has been as someone who loves people. And I've never felt anything ill towards anyone because of their skin color or because of where they come from. But to fight the kinds of racism that you're talking about that are more institutional, that feel more, I want to say subtle, but they're only subtle to me because I'm not aware of them. Those are the things that I think, as we go through what we've gone through recently, that I hope more and more people are willing to listen. I love the conversation. Maybe we'll jump off into this a little bit and hear some thoughts on this. I love the conversation that's happening on the Black Lives Matter, just as a phrase. And the people I see in my own community who are fighting against people saying, well, hashtag all lives matter, that they're not understanding, that Black Lives Matter isn't about other lives not mattering. It's about, Black lives mattering as well, about being, about fighting that oppression. So Derek, can you speak to that a little bit about kind of the Black Lives Matter movement and what that means to you personally and kind of how you've seen that?
Yeah, I have tons of thoughts on that. First off, when we talk Black Lives Matter, when you say Black Lives Matter and then you say there's the All Lives Matter and then there's Blue Lives Matter, let's be clear. All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter is not a movement. Those are not movements. I want me to tell you why, because there's no one protesting. There's no organization there. Those were literally things that were brought to smite Black Lives Matters.
Right.
Like let's be clear with that. Like there's not a All Lives Matter movement, because when what's his name? I forgot what the name of the kid was. Kid just died in Fresno. Dylan, I forgot his last name. His name is Dylan though. He got killed by the cops. And I'm like, where's the All Lives Matter guys at? Like when you see, like, why are the All Lives Matter guys not protesting with the Black Lives Matter guys? Like the reason why they're not is because they don't exist. Like that's literally like the middle finger, like all lives matter, but it's not really a movement. It's not a passion. It's not a fight. Like it's literally just to smite. Yeah. Oftentimes. Now I can't say that for everyone. Obviously, I know I have to be diplomatic, but I can't say that for everyone. But I know normally in the context where I see it, it's usually with someone to say, "Hey guys, all lives matter." Which if I was to say another thing, I'm like, okay, so if we were to have a 4K right now in Ohio and say, hey, we're gonna do a 4K for breast cancer, that doesn't mean that lung cancer sucks or doesn't matter or is not important. That just means right now we're focusing on something that is very, very serious. It's the month of October. It's breast cancer awareness. We're having a 4K. That doesn't mean lung cancer doesn't matter. It just means, or doesn't mean that thyroid cancer, or it doesn't mean that throat cancer are of no value and don't need to be eradicated too. It's just saying that we're focusing on this certain thing. So
my brother-in-law is a black man. His name is Alex. Married my husband's sister. Her name is Holly, and they have a son together named Ricardo. And, they've had to have a lot of conversations about, what it means for them to have a biracial child, for him to be male, for the expectations that are going to be coming on him as he grows up. And, he's 2 now, so he can wear little zip up hoodies. But when he gets older, hoodies aren't an option anymore.
Yeah.
Just all the stuff that Holly is having to process. And so I reached out to Holly, and we have been talking very, very openly about just, our struggles with kind of getting into a deeper understanding of what it is like to be raised in America as a Black person, which is
Yeah.
hard to do because we don't live that way. But becoming aware of it is difficult. I feel like is it so hard to be patient? Like, is it so difficult for you to hear and read people as they try to process, they're saying all lives matter. They're saying, oh, he speaks so eloquently. They're saying these things. Oh, I want a Black man's leg so I can jump higher. Is it hard for you to be patient in that moment? Because as somebody who is a student myself, being a student to you, the teacher, I'm looking to you to kind of guide through. Like, I'm just still working through my anger personally. And then I think about all of the years, the hundreds of years of patience that have had to be just continually taught person to person to person to almost just be willing to outgrit and outlast the horrible injustices that happen apparently on a regular basis. And that's just so hard for me to accept. Like, it's just hard for me to believe this is the world we live in. So like, I'm kind of feeling discouraged and bummed out. And I'm like, I can't even imagine how, in general it feels to be a minority that is hated on, like, oh gosh, I'm about to cry. I just can't believe this is like the world we live in. It's just like, this sucks.
It does. It does. And I think the beauty of this is that we're having this conversation. Look at this. See, this is what the gospel is, right? This is what the potential is for our world, is that through these hurts and through these pains, if the church would rise up and say, let's have a conversation, you see moments where people begin to get it, and you see moments where the church begins to live out that Acts 2, 3, 4, when they were bearing one another's burdens and they were taking all of their resources and saying, here, let's do what we have to do to make this body work. And I think this is what's happening, DNA. We're seeing you two come together and say something's wrong here. And I think that's all that Black people ever have wanted is there's no like, I want to be bigger or better. It's just equality. It's just, I want people to feel my burden. I want people to say, like, oftentimes we get backhanded when we say, hey, there's a problem, and we get backhanded. And I think what I'm thankful for is that I'm getting a platform to be able to say, this is what I feel, this is what's happening. And you're like, okay, yeah, I think so, but there is hope, and the hope is in Jesus. The hope is in the fact that we know whether one day God eradicates one day he's going to eradicate all sin, and he's going to make this world perfect again. And that's what I hold on to, is knowing that whether I die and my burden is just to be carrying and being patient and being loving with people, even though they may be indifferent to my struggle, or they may even add to my struggle. I know that one day Jesus is coming back, and that I'll be able to rest then, and Jesus was persecuted. So, I mean, if the person that I worship was persecuted, he said, if you want to follow me, you got to carry your cross. So I'm like, if this is the cross I have to carry, then I'll carry it. But at the same time, I also want to fight to say, like these are real issues that the church needs to address,
I think there are different opportunities to respond, right? And I think what becomes overwhelming that Danae is dealing with and I deal with as well is when we really start to put ourselves in your shoes, which I think is so important for all of us to put ourselves in, each other's shoes. It's kind of one of the reasons we do what we do. When we do that, it gets overwhelming to think of how much you have to deal with this, how many times it happens, and that you have to continually find the proper way to respond, continually to have that patience or to, so for instance, a man says something to you, to be able not to laugh because it's not funny, but also be able to have a moment with him to maybe teach him something he didn't know, or even just give him a little bit of grace or whatever. And those are just the smaller things. That's not even talking about responding to the bigger things, like
Absolutely.
when another black man gets taken out by, a cop unnecessarily, and to have to think, how easily could that be me? And to have to put yourself in that situation. I think it gets overwhelming. And how do you handle that? Like, what do you do to, respond to the things small and large in your own life? How do you process through it?
The gospel is applicable to every aspect. And I think what I do is I just try to continue to do what the Lord says that we are to do. And that's if someone wrongs you, you have to forgive them 70 times in a day, and I think that's what that is like, the Bible speaks about loving our enemies. The Bible speaks about us, fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, kindness, self-control. It's having that grace and knowing that, seeing people for who they really are. Some people are just ignorant to the fact of what they say is offensive, and sometimes you just have to just filter that through the gospel and say, well, God, this is a bit painful, but I know they didn't mean it, so I'll let it ride. And then for the people that are belligerent, you do what Jesus did, and you pray for them. I think that's on the small level.
Yeah. So how do you process through? Let me just talk about the most two recent examples of the bigger events where it's people
human
losing
life.
human life that is extinguished.
Yeah, I think institutionally that there has to be change, and the only way that change can come about is if people actually say something. The white evangelical church, mostly, not everyone, but mostly, historically, has been silent during slavery, or even actually proponents of slavery. And then during the civil rights, have been silent during the civil rights movement. And my hope is that during this time where things are happening, that they're not silent now. And like, since I have inroads with brothers and sisters in that world, I'm fighting to say, hey guys, listen, this is the third time. let's try to see what we can do to try to work together to try to stamp this out, because we rally against abortion, we rally for traditional marriage, we rally against sex slavery, sex trafficking. Like, why can't we rally for civil rights of African Americans? But the first thing is you have to understand that there's a real issue. Right. So some of that is actually peeling off the typical illusions as to what people say is the real issues that's going on. So, oftentimes we'll get into conversations at the macro level about systematically what's going on. And it's just, some people just are clueless as to what's happening. Like, prime example, when you look at the drug laws, cocaine and crack are the exact same drug. Only thing is, crack has been it's cooked and turned into rock form. That's the only main difference. But the difference in time for the same amount of drugs, if you find a person with an ounce of the difference between a person with an ounce of cocaine and an ounce of crack is a 30-year prison sentence. Well, why is that? Well, it's mostly because black people often are poor, and the drug that they use to medicate is crack. The drug that a lot of rich people use to medicate, cocaine. So oftentimes you look and you see a black person with the same amount of the drug, both of them go to jail for different sentences. That's wrong. When you look at the prison, that black people are 13% of the population, but we make up 70% of the prison.
Wow.
That's wrong. That's not even logical. When you think about that, it's not even logical. Like, it should be that the prison makeup should make up the same. It should look just like the makeup of the population should look like. So the issue is either one, black people are animals, which I don't believe that. I'm black, I'm not an animal. And most of the people I know they're not animals. It's either that or there's something seriously wrong at the system, at where the system is at, and I mean, I'll be the first to admit, if you listen to any of my music, that within our black culture, we have some work to do. I mean, when you think of just crime and poverty and jobs and opportunities, but the thing is, oftentimes people will say, "Well, that's the black person's fault. They got to fix that." How can I fix getting a job when I'm not the person that's creating the jobs? It's mostly white people that are in charge of creating the jobs. So how in the world can black people fix that? Like, there's no way to fix that. Like, how, so.
Yeah, I read a statistic that a black man who goes to like an Ivy League college and graduates has about the same opportunity to get a job as a white man who just got out of prison.
Exactly.
And I don't know if that's accurate because I didn't do like triple my research. But
Right. But
that's what you read. That's what I've been reading about the last week.
I mean, it's just and this is the subtle biases that we're talking about, that people don't necessarily. I don't know if it's raging Ku Klux Klan kill all black people,
Right.
but I think it's the subtle biases that we have in our heart, where there's what's it, Airbnb while black, that they have people that have literally been like, hey, it's a black guy, like, hey, I want to get this Airbnb, and the person is like, man, it's not available. My girlfriend's coming in town.
Yeah, something just came up. Yeah.
and then a white guy, and then they get their white friend to say, hey, get this Airbnb for me. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. That's the reason why it's hard to get a job. The subtle bias is there. The idea that black is worse. Like the idea that a black person is going to be lazy. The idea that a black person is not going to get the job done. Idea that a black person is inadequate. Like, that's the reason why it's hard for a black person to get a job. And the thing is, there's lazy white people. There's lazy Asian people. Like, there's lazy people everywhere. So the idea is, like, when you start saying that all black people are criminals, all black people are thugs, all black people are this and that, or even this stupid idea of black on black crime. I hate when people use that word because, like, yeah, black on black crime. I heard someone say, and it's always just used as a distraction. No one brings up black on black crime until a cop kills a black guy. Then all of a sudden, let's talk about black on black crime. So one, I'm always like, well, if you're so passionate about black on black crime, why aren't you doing anything about it? And why do you only bring it up when a black guy gets killed by cops? That's one. But number two is this idea that people kill in the proximity of their community. And in America, white people live with white people, black people live with black people, and it's very, very segregated. So if you look on the numbers for white people killing white people, the crime numbers are almost identical to black people killing black people. If percentage-wise, people kill within their proximity. So if I live in a community, I hurt the people that are closest to me. So black people hurt black people in black communities, and white people hurt white people in white communities, and Asians hurt Asians in Asian communities. That's just a distraction and just used to further invalidate black people's humanity.
And it also completely ignores another huge factor in all of this, which I think is poverty. And the idea that a lot of these communities are so impoverished because it's so hard for that equality to happen, that, we know poverty leads to more crime. We know, so I wouldn't look at race as an issue with that kind of stuff as much as I would with economic inequality and those kind of things.
Absolutely. And the thing is, right, the issue is economically. Like, I mean, like, when we look at the economics of how everything is, like, yes, you take a bunch of poor people, put them all in the same area, the crime rates are gonna be higher. It doesn't matter what color they are.
Exactly.
So, but for some reason, when we look at our system, it's harder for black people to get good paying jobs. I mean, that's that. And I don't think the answer is welfare. I don't know one black person that wants to live on welfare. And most of my family has been on welfare at some point in time in their life. But every black person that I know would rather have a great job over welfare. Like, and that's one of the biggest issues. I mean, I could go on. I mean, there's so many things. Like, it's the idea, too, that people say, they turn civil rights into a political agenda. Like, that's just those liberals. I don't think African-American civil rights should be a liberal thing. And I hate when people try to turn this to political. And I think that's because the detachment from a lot of white people because they're like, this is new to us. This has to
Yeah.
be something that Hillary Clinton is cooking up. And I'm like, no, this is real to me. Like I've been handcuffed in the back of a police car for no reason. I've been pulled over with a gun out on me for no reason, and I'm scared for my life. Like, it's not political. This is real. Like, this is not and politics can't fix it. And the last thing, I know I'm ranting, but
No,
the
you're
last
good.
thing, there are a lot of, very liberal, non-conservative people in the Black Lives Matter movement. But my question is, where is the conservative Black Lives Matter movement? Like I hear people in the church always want to say, well, Black Lives Matter is this, Black Lives Matter is that, Black Lives Matter is this. But I'm like, where's the movement from the church? Like, as a black man, like, I'm like, where is the white evangelical people that stand up and say, you know what, this is wrong, and I'm starting a movement, and it's gonna be filtered through the lens of the gospel? Where is that at? Because I don't see it. I would give it a shot.
Right.
I would check it out if it existed.
But you get the impression, though, that if it wasn't called Black Lives Matter, whatever the conversation around racism is, there are going to be a lot of voices that are adding to it, because and
Absolutely.
trying to take away from it, because that's what people do when they're afraid of change, when they're afraid. Like, I wonder in my life, I'm like, okay, are there so many people trying to discredit, or go in and dismiss? Because like it's like there's so many voices that are in our community right now because of the vastness of the internet. We can hear so many people's opinions. And there's so many people wanting to just take away from a very simple fact that one man killed another man. Like, can we talk about just, that's all? Like, can we just all agree that that's not okay? Okay, then the rest of it you can work out on your own time, but let's get to like the very simple boiled down version. That's not right. And I'm watching, something that Alex has pointed out is something that happens frequently, which is, a black man is killed, and then all of a sudden it's his entire record. And we're trying to dismiss that it's okay that he was murdered because, he had this happen to him and he had this on his record. I kind of feel like that happens a little bit in Christian lifestyle too, where it's like, oh, well, you're divorced, so we're going to need you to, step down out of your position. Like, oh, you've just been dismissed as a person because of something that we can pin to you. But when you are in like this culture where you're being dismissed because of your race, like it's more than that. It's more than just, I think I saw somebody post something and I was so furious. It was like,
Alton Sterling?
Yeah,
Okay.
It was like his entire like history of, what has happened to him being arrested or whatever. And I'm like, I
Like
really,
a rap sheet or
yeah,
something?
yeah. And I was like, are you trying to say that because he was arrested at some point in time and for whatever, that's okay that he was murdered? Like, is that what you're actually trying to say? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to just find my peaceful place right now because I cannot handle this much. Like, that's ridiculous. That's stupid.
Yeah, why can't we all just be together and just say, okay, this is wrong?
Right.
Like, yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I, in a way, feel really, really bad for you that you are that ignorant, that you really feel that way, that you can dismiss human life because of something that they did. But the only way that I can relate to that is in my being judged real harshly in the Christian community growing up. So I'm like, okay, even though I have zero rights to try to relate to, any African American on that level, and I would never try to, and I'm very aware of my whiteness. Like I almost feel like I don't even want to say anything because I don't have a right to say anything because I haven't been through it, but I'm trying to relate.
But that's part of the problem too, though. But part of the problem is in a majority culture where the majority is white. If everybody who's white goes, oh, I can't say anything because I don't relate, then there's a real silence that happens. Instead of saying, okay, I haven't been there, but I still have something I can say.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean?
I think that's why I've danced around the topic, even with my friends who are black, who I know would have a conversation about race with me. I know they would, because it's not like I've been trying to stir the pot or anything. But now I think more than ever, it's important for us to figure out how to relate and to figure out the ways that we can kind of go in and find that, like, I'm in pain, as I cried just a minute ago. I'm feeling it, I'm feeling like the injustice of it and how this needs to change in our culture. But I'm like, how does it change? One person at a time. Is it unfriending people on Facebook? Yeah, maybe. Maybe I don't want to have, racial conversations on my page. And that's my right to just be like, okay, I don't want to have this in my soup. Like,
you mean negative
your ingredient
racist conversations?
not appreciated. Yeah. So that's part of it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the conversations are great. And I think it's also, I think, again, and I'm a Christian, so I'm going to be really critical of the church, but I think just the church standing up and doing something about it, organizing and doing things to help further legal action to fight for the rights of the ones whose rights are being suppressed. Like, I mean, I look oftentimes and I'm like, man, it saddens me that I see oftentimes. I mean, we'll see people send money overseas forever, but they won't send money to Chicago. Like, they only use Chicago as a scapegoat. Like, I'm like, send a mission trip to Chicago. If you're gonna send one to Kenya, you're gonna send one to India, send one to Chicago. Like, understand why things are happening in our culture. Like, it's not by chance and happenstance. These things are designed. It's a system that needs to be rallied against and needs to be reformed. At the end of the day, that's really what it is. There should be no way that I could look on TV, see a person get gunned down, and the cop not be held accountable for that. That is just unacceptable. As a taxpayer, as an American, I was born here. I don't know nothing else but America. Like, as a taxpayer, there's no way, like, a police officer is a citizen just like me. And it's a hard job. And I'm not going to sit up here and act. Look, there's some places in some neighborhoods that I wouldn't go. Like, just because you're black, you don't get a free pass to go wherever you want. Like, there's some places that's like, man, these are dangerous areas. And I understand as police officers, one of my good friends, Bill Fitzgerald, he's a state trooper. And in Tennessee, you don't know this because it didn't hit mainstream media, but a state trooper got killed because a guy, he went crazy and started shooting cops. And like, so I know how painful this is and how hard this is on both sides. I fear for my buddy Bill. I don't think he's on patrol now, but he got friends that are on patrol and all that stuff. So, like, I understand that. But then at the same time, if you can bring the Aurora, Colorado guy that shot up a whole movie theater with automatic rifles and was going to his car to get more, if you can bring him in for his day in court, if you can bring in Dylan Roof, who killed 9 people in a church, if you can bring him in for his day in court, well, doggone it, you can bring Alton Sterling selling CDs on the side of the street with a gun in his pocket in for his day in court. Like, I'm not trying to make a saint out of everybody. Like, every black person that's been killed by police is not a saint. But at the same time, we have a justice system that's supposed to give people their day in court. And even the justice system is corrupt when we look at the numbers. But at the very least, we don't have to kill the guy. And then I hate when people say, well, he was scared. Like, well, of course he was scared. You're supposed to be scared. Like, when you're in situations where it's dangerous, like, yeah, police officers are scared. But that's a costly mistake to make when you're scared, to shoot a man 6 times. Or they shot a guy in Ohio 120-something times. Then the guy, after they shot him 122 times, another guy jumped on the hood. It was a family. A husband and wife, neither one of them, or boyfriend and girlfriend, neither one of them had a gun. They shot him hundreds of times. All the cops lined up and just executed him. Then one of them jumped on the hood and shot through the window at him 9 more times or 13 more times, unloaded into their chests. Like, you cannot tell me. And so, in the way that trial unfolded, they said, since we don't know who shot the fatal shot, nobody's getting tried. Since we don't know who did it, no one has to deal with that.
It's like how long
wrong.
has that has to have been going on in our society for so long, because that kind of language of being able to just sweep those lives under the rug and just turn our eyes away from justice against the police officers because they don't want to prosecute their own people. that has to change. And you're right. Something has got to change. Here's the hard part. It's going to take everyone unifying together and then just realizing we've got to get into the system ourselves. Like I'm not good at writing legislation, and I don't know exactly how to go about it. And one of the things that you mentioned in your interview with Mike was to go to
NAACP.
Yeah, an NAACP meeting.
I'm going to mention something.
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to do it, Aaron.
I just have to tell you that she was telling me about this part of your interview where you encouraging people, which I think is brilliant, to go to an NAACP meeting or something like that. She says, yeah, he was encouraging people to go to an NCAA meeting and.
Only thing you gonna get there is a scholarship.
I doubt that.
But
yeah. I did. I went and I looked in. There's 2 local chapters where I live, so I'm like, okay, so that's me going in and just sitting down and going, what do I do now? I'm here. What do I do? And I get overwhelmed by things like that, where it's like, I don't even know how you're going to change culture if you're talking about how many years. Was it like, how many years has this been going on? Okay, but then we've got stuff going for us. We've got phones, we've got video. It seems like more and more people,
accountability,
whether
seems to be
in
on the
poverty
increase
or
for
not,
sure.
like have access to cell phones. Was it? I can't remember. Is it Philando?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Philando Castile.
His girl. That she was able to just immediately start broadcasting, not just even a video that can be dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
Broadcasting.
Was she on Facebook Live? Is that what?
Yeah,
she went on Facebook Live.
She went on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
It's like this is the first time in our history as a nation where we have access to instant communication. And I think that the more that there are, and what's scary is seeing how violent the police are. I was always taught, police were really happy and helpful. And then I'm watching these videos and I'm like, whoa. Yeah, at some point between whenever I was 8 and now as an adult woman, they're teaching police to really shut off a part of themselves to do their job. Like, they're not seeing the humans. And I'm not talking about all police, like you were saying, Derek. There's not. This is. I don't want to make blanket statements.
But some of it could be in the training.
Just like I don't want there to be blanket statements against anybody. I don't want to do the same thing. I don't want to perpetuate the problem here. But yeah, maybe some of it's training. Is there something where we can go in and there's a difference with training? Is there a difference in there's just so many different ways, and that's part of my concern is like what's the right way to go. I just think it's making sure that I don't shut myself back off again and go back into my happy place that I get to go to as a white young woman in America.
Denial.
Right?
So many of us have lived in denial.
I have to stay awake.
In really seeing racism as a problem that has been in the past, but we're through now.
And even if it's just, a few people here and a few people there, it's us finding each other and finding encouragement in each other and continuing to have these conversations. One of my questions that I was going to ask at the very beginning, and is like, how is in your friend group? I know you said that you talked about your fans and things like that, but in your family and your friend group, like what's the vibe right now?
Discouragement. Like, it's almost to the place where, we were angry with Trayvon. We were angry with Mike Brown. We were angry with Tamir Rice. We were angry with Laquan McDonald. We were angry with Sandra Bland. We were angry with, it's just discouragement, I think, and it's just the idea of, all right, well, just keep pressing through. It's the range of emotions, I think, as far as amongst my family. My mom is just like, this is just what it's been. This is just what it's been. It's not any different. And I think it's a degree of just coming to the terms with it's how it's going to be. And I think for me, I'm like, well, if this is how it's going to be, I'm not going to be quiet about it, because until there's some help, there's nothing we can do about it. Some of it, too, is just beyond fixing. The only thing, like, law cannot legislate your heart. So racism is a heart issue. It's not a legal issue. Like, there's not a law you can put in to make someone not be racist. The only thing you can do is hold them accountable for their biases and their procedures and mistakes. So, and I think that's what, like, I'm not gonna be naive and think that, there's not gonna be people even listening to this podcast that probably are like, man, I wish this dumb black dude would shut up. Like, I mean, I'm sure probably are, and I'm okay with that because that's just the nature of sin, and that's just how it has affected our world. And we know until Jesus comes back, that's not gonna change. But what's tangible is legislation that says a cop can't just discharge his weapon and kill a man and not be held accountable for that. Get put on paid leave and go fishing somewhere or go chill. Like, that's unacceptable. Like, I read an article that said it was a black police officer in St. Louis, and he said 15% of cops are gonna do the right thing regardless of who's watching. He said there's another 15% that are racist, evil, and will hurt you. And then the other 70%, they usually just go with the flow of who they're around. He said, but the problem is the racist or the bully 15% has such a loud voice because that's the nature of being that's the nature of that it's like a virus. That's the nature of it. So usually people that are the 15% is gonna do the right thing anyway, they're gonna be more humble, more quiet. They're not gonna be domineering. They're gonna be forgiving. So most people will gravitate if they're gonna be like, well, I don't want to tick one guy off or the other. Then they're not gonna necessarily care about ticking the good guy off. They don't want to tick off the racist guy because they don't want him to get them in trouble or to bully him or to whatever. Then there's also the pressure of, as far as police officers, I mean, it's a fraternity. They're brothers. They have to they have to watch out for each other. I mean, they go through some of the worst things together. So, they have to have each other's back. But so what happens is that 70%, they're quiet. They go along to get along. They're like, well, this is my brother, so I gotta watch out for him and make sure, that he doesn't suffer. And that's what has to change. It's the culture that has to change. It's like, if you look at the shout out to the chief of police in Dallas. Like, I went and looked at his story. His son was killed by the Dallas police officers in a shootout. And this was right when he had became chief. But one thing that he did that I think people missed is Dallas had there's a show that used to come on called First 48. And it talks about how crazy, in the first 48 hours you have to solve a murder. Dallas was always on First 48, and it's a pretty rough city. But at the same time, they had a lot of police brutality cases taken out. And what this man did when he became chief of police, he fired 70 police officers. And he changed the culture there where they went from having a ton of police brutality cases or open cases to I think he split them in half or maybe, lowered the percentage of cases by almost, 60%. And that's what has to change in St. Louis, in Baton Rouge, in different areas. Like, I think the Nashville PD is pretty good too. Like, when he wrote something about police brutality. That's why it has to change the culture among police officers as to saying what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And that can only be done internally. Mm-hmm. That means that it's people that, if they're not doing their job right, they need to be fired.
Yeah.
Like, they don't need to be protected. They need to be fired. So a good police officer can step in and take that place.
Sometimes we think, what I hear you saying is sometimes we think that, what it means to be humble or what it means to be, let's say, even a pacifist or something like that is the same thing as being quiet. And that's not necessarily true. You can be boldly humble. You can be boldly pacifistic.
I feel like you're preaching to me.
Yeah.
Preach it, Aaron.
Well, I'm just saying you can have attitudes of peace and kindness and the fruits of the Spirit and all that kind of stuff, and do it in a strong way that can be heard by others and seen by others.
But it needs to happen up the chain into places where maybe it's not as easy. And you talked about Ferguson earlier in St. Louis. I remember reading that they were going in and they were changing even some of the court and how the local court works, because they found that, the way that the tickets were being given out, was almost so oppressive. Like, you would get ticketed for everything. And so you would get caught up in the system and you would get caught up getting put into jail. And it was kind of fueling the local government essentially. And so they, people went in and they're like, this can't be the way that the local government works, and start to change local government. And so that's good. It's almost like we need to just keep encouraging those people who know how to make those changes and encourage those leaders to make those changes, which means, like you said, Derek, you just can't be quiet. You have to say something and speak up for something. And for me, seeing the images that I have now seen, I have seen with my own eyes what's going on. And that is, I think, a huge component that will hopefully be part of change. And the other part of it for me, besides just going in and hoping that, that there's going to be adjustments in the police force, et cetera, is our culture. I am not used to, I miss, like you're talking about like the subtle racial slurs earlier. Derek and my brother-in-law Alex and Holly are talking about that stuff too. Just the subtle stuff that I don't even pick up on because it's, I just don't get it. Mm-hmm. But you can see how people who don't realize that it's actually offensive to say things or to believe that that's, true. I'm not talking about calling somebody a name or whatever. Those are pretty on the nose. That's a pretty obvious one. But in our culture, the things that you're seeing in, television or like even cartoons, they'll like make light of something that's actually really serious and we need to stop like making light of. Does that make sense? Which, and I don't even know, but tons of them, I'm sure, Derek, like just little comments about, people's intelligence. Oh, I saw one the other day. There was a black man who was playing a role and he had this like comment about chicken and waffles or something. I was like, that's what it is. It's that, or I'll just be in there eating the watermelon. It was those types of things. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to pick up on it. Like, this is infused in our culture.
Exactly. And like, but then there's also stuff like there's shows like, I don't know if you ever seen Zootopia, but Zootopia did a great job at talking about, did a great job at breaking down systematic oppression and what it looks like in a system. Like, I mean, you think about it, the fox, no one likes a fox. Mm-hmm. Foxes don't have any real value. But then once the rabbit got to know the fox, she realizes, oh, this guy is really, really smart. And he's sharp and he could really be a great police officer if his
predator
abilities were pushed to the right way. All right, a predator, prey, like, I mean, there's so much about systematic racism and stuff in there that, I mean, it's huge.
That moment when she's at the podium, the little bunny's at the podium, and she thinks she's doing a good job and talking about the fox, but really she's just destroying him with all of that moment was like, that is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That is perfect. Spot on the nose.
Coming to an understanding in our personal lives about what we are consuming and what we think is funny, and it's not funny.
Yeah, I think media has a great opportunity to speak to those things in a positive way. Derek, which is one of the things I love about you being able to write a song
right?
The night, this stuff is happening, to be able to, to sit in your studio, write that thing, get it out. I think it was one of only 2 things I tweeted that day. And basically I just tweeted and said, please listen to this. Let's keep listening forever to each other. And can you tell me a little bit, because I think maybe we can end this interview time together by playing that song for people, if you don't mind, if that's all right with you. But if you talk a little bit about the process of writing that down, what you wanted to say with it, how that came out of you, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so I was sitting upstairs, me and my wife, we were hanging, me and her. We put the kids down about 7, so me and her can have just some chill time.
Amen. Amen. I've got 4 boys, man. I know it.
Yeah, I got 2. So, man, you listen. Hats off to you and high five when I see you, bro. You, man. But I got 2 boys, and which I think, man, when like my wife was crying yesterday because a lady prayed for her, just praying for her heart, because that's the thing I think that hurts the most is my wife being afraid for my 2 boys that, if they ever get pulled over for something stupid, it could end in them being dead and then criminalized on television. Well, he shouldn't have been he shouldn't have had a hoodie on while he was driving or whatever. But I mean, that's a side note. But we were talking, and I was on Twitter, and the video came up, and we watched it, and I just was broken. Like, I just was broken. Like, here we go again. Like, how many more of these videos do we have to see? You know, I think some of that also goes back to, I remember watching my granddad get beat by like 8 cops when I was like 12. He fought back, but you know, they beat him with billy clubs when I was like 12. And just watching them jump that guy like that, hold him down, it really kind of took me back probably to when my grandfather got jumped like that. And then he got shot. And I just told my wife, I was like, I gotta go downstairs. And that's always been my outlet since I was about 12. I'm very emotional. And I think all artists are emotional in a sense. That's why they make great art, because they, like, when we see a color red, we feel the warmth of the redness. Like, we have great highs and great lows. So I think when you see something like that, most artists, it affects them in different ways. And I think it just affected me in a way. I told my wife, I was like, I got to go downstairs and just kind of tinker a little bit. And then I was tinkering, and I looked up, and it was 3 hours later, and I had recorded a song. And I don't even think I really wrote the verses down much. Like, it was like part freestyle, part writing, and it didn't take long at all. And I made the beat, wrote the lyrics, recorded the lyrics, mixed it, and mastered it all in like 2 to 3 hours. And it just was because, like, it wasn't a song. Like, most of the time we write songs and we're like, man, we got to get that perfect hook to be able to get it on the radio. Like, for me, I just was like, I just have to cry out to the Lord on this music. And I also want to be a voice, because being a Christian, I mean, being black, like we talked about the issues with black, but then also being black and being Christian is hard, because, like, I'm mandated to pray for my enemies. Like, that's what God wants us to love our enemies and love those that will hurt us. And that's a hard thing to do. And I feel like oftentimes in the church, there's not a lot of voices speaking out for racial issues, especially, for guys like me that are in different circles. We're not just in just normal black church circles. So I want to write a song that emotionally would connect with those that are going through the same type of emotions I'm going through. Had very little to do with making my case as to why Alton Sterling's death. I didn't even mention Alton's name in the song, but it's just that emotions of, man, we're supposed to be free, but for some reason, every time, we feel like we're free, there's a chain, connected to us. And I think that chain is this system constantly reminds us how little our lives matter, oftentimes. So that's pretty much was the whole mindset behind the song. Yeah. See, I know you probably gonna dissect this every which way, but I hope that while you looking, you see the real pain and the real struggle. Yeah. They don't tell me be quiet. They don't say I'm stirring up the pot. They don't say I'm too emotional. They don't say I need to calm down. Usually I hold it in. I don't wanna mess the paper up. I don't wanna be too aggressive. That can make you uncomfortable. But do you know what it feel like? Handcuffs, scared for your life. Pray to God he ain't had a bad day. This could be your very last night. This is so exhausting. Lord knows we tired. They say wait for the facts, like I can't believe my eyes. Wake me up from this nightmare. Tell me this ain't true. Do black men have rights? Do black men bear the image of God too? As if we do, then tell me why we always get shot down. Why we can't get a trial day? Why death the only answer now? I know that it's good cops work the office of Fitzgerald at my church, but tell me why the bad cops never get to see the justice system work. But I know the Lord's still just, and I know he still love us. But I'm starting to feel in America the justice system mean just us. And I don't have no explanation. I'm just hurt.
I know that it's complicated, but it still hurts. Yeah. We supposed to be free. We supposed to be free. And why I feel like chains hanging on me. Yeah. If we supposed to be free. Why I feel like chains hanging on me. Yeah. If we supposed to be free. Why I feel like chains hanging on me. We supposed to be free. We supposed to be free. Yeah, listen, homie, keep your head up. Yeah, I know you probably fed up. And feel like they ain't hearing us. Feel like they only fearing us. All I know is that we here today. There's a God and he feel our pain. All I know is every time we pray, he'll be here to wipe our tears away. We are more than criminals. We are more than imbeciles. Our fathers ain't all deadbeats. We ain't all thugging in the streets. The land of opportunity is only for the ones with opportunity. And we just trying to catch up. Years after slavery. All I'm saying is it's complicated, and I don't get all of it. But all I know is that this pain in my heart. Oh yeah, I feel all of it. I know the Lord's still just, and I know he still love us. But it's starting to feel in America, the justice system means just us. And I don't have no explanation. I'm just hurt. And I know that it's complicated, but it still hurts. We supposed to be free. We supposed to be free. And why I feel like chains hanging on me. Yeah. If we supposed to be free. Why I feel like chains hanging on me. If we supposed to be free. Why I feel like chains hanging on me. We supposed to be free. We supposed to be free. Yeah.
Thanks, Derek. I appreciate it, man. And thank you for taking time with us today, taking time out of your morning. I know you got a garage that needs cleaning. And
let's just keep talking all day. This is an incredible conversation.
Listen, we've got a culture that needs cleaning much more than your garage needs cleaning. So
absolutely.
We are very happy to have this conversation. So thank you for being a part of it. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you letting me speak for sure.
Wow. So that happened.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time that I've actually listened to that song was here as we got this podcast ready to go just a moment ago in my time. Yeah. I don't know when you're listening to the podcast now because it's now in the podcast feed. And thank you for listening and thank you for your feedback and thank you for your support. But we do our show with a live audience. And so I'm kind of coming out of that whole conversation.
What a great conversation with the live audience today.
Such a respectful group of people. And thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for the Patreon support that we get. This podcast is made possible by our fans. And we like to thank you every single time we have an opportunity to do so. So thank you guys for giving at patreon.com to keep the show going.
If you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation, let's keep it going. Feel free to email us, aaronanddanae@gmail.com. Certainly you can tweet us, hit us up on Facebook, wherever you find us. We would love to continue this conversation.
And if you want to tweet at Derek Minor, let him know that you listened. It's at the Derek Minor, DerekMinor. I know some of you in the chat would like to reach out to him personally. That's a good way to do so.
As always, we appreciate you so much, and thanks for being a part of the conversation with us.
they have music almost every night.
Oh,
So,
that sounds so
yeah.
wonderful. I want to live
That's
in
cool.
Nashville someday. It sounds so fun.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Every time you think about living somewhere else, you know you'll miss Springfield.
That is true.
You just want to
true.
pretend to live in all these places.
I need a
True that.
teleporter. I need a teleport device.
That's
is what
right.
needs to happen.
Teleportation.
Derek,
Well, yeah, not that far away though.
see, no, but Aaron, actually, I just said that, but Aaron asked me, was it last week, if I would get into a teleportation device, and I said no.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have my molecules all mixed up and come out on the other side
I think
with
he was saying,
a blend body.
I think he was saying we're not that far from Nashville. We're not that far from having teleporters.
Okay. I misunderstood that.
Hey, listen. I was sitting here like, what is this girl talking about? I was like, all right. I was just gonna let you continue on that story about your molecules getting scrambled. I was gonna see how long you were gonna go, but I was actually talking about in a car.
Oh right, okay, I'm with you now.
Y'all are crazy.
Yeah, indeed.